what's going on, Los Angeles, Bruin Nation, LAFB fam? Your dynamic duo, the Thriller and Madman, back together again for all of your UCLA football needs. We got a really fun conversation here. Perhaps a front runner in this head coaching search starting to emerge, particularly after our last conversation with Wayne. We're going to preview the Michigan State game. But first and foremost, and always, my brother, Will the Thrill Decker, the man, the myth, the legend. How we doing, brother? How's the last few days been?
I'm doing great, man. Still, riding the high from last weekend's game. We got college football just around the corner. We got a 9 a.m. kick. It's going to be early. We're going to be breaking down some of the Michigan State game. But this article has got me the most excited about all those things we just listed. So, dude, I cannot wait to talk to you about it. I had to ping you today. Like, did you read this? We got to talk about this ASAP. And a lot of cool names in there. Pete Nakos is a plugged-in individual, and it's looking like UCLA may have some good names in the running here.
No question about it, Thriller. Hashtag plugged in Pete, maybe is the new name for Mr. Nakos. Yeah. And ironically enough, Thriller, right? I mean, we were scheduled to have Pete Nakos on the show just a couple of weeks ago, and really excited about having him on here soon as well. I know he had indicated to us, he's like, guys, I've got some things in the work. I'm sort of working on some things. Some things are cooking. As they marinate, I'm going to kind of come on the show. Well, marination indeed, Thriller. We can check that on the microwave, that some marination has taken place. Pete Nakos, great article published this morning as of the recording here on Thursday night, laying out some candidates for the UCLA head coaching search. A lot of reputable sources that Pete Nakos has always had, obviously unnamed sources, but you got to believe that Nakos has a very nice, I think, pathway and link into the mind and the mentality of this new football search committee. And I think by all indications, Thriller, they're thinking big. We had Wayne on just a couple days ago. He was alluding to it. He really liked what he was hearing about the mentality of this search committee. And clearly they're starting to think big. Some big names, Thriller, on this list, headlined by Jedd Fisch, who is someone you and I have talked ad nauseum, it feels like, what a fit he would be at UCLA. Someone who has coached, in Los Angeles. He was interim at UCLA. He was on the Rams coaching staff. Someone that wants to desperately coach at UCLA. He was really sort of heartbroken when he didn't get the job back then, and the job went to Chip Kelly. I think very much was eager to be in the running in the post-Chip Kelly era. We know the incredible job he did in Arizona over 3 years. I mean, first year he was 1-11. By the end of the third year, 10-win team, won the Alamo Bowl. Best year in Arizona football history, really, the last 75 years. A guy who is charismatic, incredible recruiter, I think understands quarterbacks, understands how to build a culture, understands how to build on both sides of the ball. Would just be an ideal fit between personality, market in Los Angeles, ability to recruit, and then everything that comes around with the UCLA ecosystem. Just feels like an absolute match made in heaven. And it's somebody that you and I have talked about for the better part of 2 years. And we even alluded to it in our last episode that, Tim Skipper is going to have to go up against Jedd Fisch and is going to have to go up against Jonathan Smith. And if he beats them, it really elevates his stock for this position as well. And I think, Thriller, what's interesting is we have always loved this candidate, but the one thing that has given us a little bit of hesitation, a little bit of trepidation, has always been the buyout. And the buyout right now for Fisch is somewhere between 10 and 12 million. And we've always said, how much of an appetite does UCLA have from a football priority standpoint to jump back into that world of buyouts and dead money to coaches after the athletic department has had a 6-year deficit? Because that's what it would take to pluck a guy like Jedd Fisch over. So really excited to get your thoughts there. But other names mentioned in this article, notably Ed Orgeron, Brent Brennan, Tosh Lapui, So really kind of interesting list. And I know you and I talked about it offline of how Ed Orgeron was, I think, someone out of the gates that they were considering. And you and I talked about this last episode as well, because I think the college football landscape has changed so much that you're really looking for your head coach to be more of a CEO, more of a recruiter, more of a fundraiser, someone with a big personality. And then you want to hire strong coordinators around that head coach. So I understand kind of the Ed Orgeron model, but it was very clear that Jedd Fisch got the most notoriety in this Pete Nakos article. And I'm just very excited. It may happen. It may not happen. It's early. Jedd Fisch is also someone who you and I talked about. He's a flight risk. He's an alum of Florida. That Florida job might open up here at the end of the year. Could he be using this as negotiating leverage to actually get the Florida job? There's all kinds of elements here, but I just love the fact that the committee is presumably thinking so big, and that's really what we're hopeful and excited about. So your thoughts, Thriller, on the article, Jedd Fisch, and everything else?
Yeah, I think it's really encouraging because I think it shows that the committee as a whole is thinking big, and that's all you want as UCLA fans. Of the potential candidates that I think would have interest in UCLA, Fisch has been at the top of our list for a long time. You know, I retweeted a tweet I had from like November of 2023 today talking about that was my dream candidate when the wheels were kind of starting to fall off for Chip back in the day. He ultimately left Arizona for Washington at that point, where he made a bowl game last year. He went 500, but this guy, I just love everything about this guy. And he is a program builder. Like what he did at the University of Arizona, they went 0-12. Kevin Sumlin flames out there. Someone's got to take the baton and kind of build back Arizona through sheer hard recruiting, through offensive scheming, through finding the right fit in players. He was able to get them from 0 wins to about 10 wins in a 2.5-year span, which I think is an incredible show of progress. And that was, Pac-12. This wasn't the Big 12 Arizona team. That was Pac-12 with your Oregons, your SCs, your Utahs back in the day. So I think he's a phenomenal talent. I also remember some of the recruits he got. It was a shock when Tetaroa McMillan out of Servite here in Anaheim committed. He was like a top 30 prospect in the entire country. And like, they just got Tetaroa McMillan. They just won a game last year. Like, how is this even possible? That's the type of presence that this guy possesses. And you look at some of the places he learned from. Like, he coached with Pete Carroll and the Seahawks in 2010. He coached at the University of Michigan with Jim Harbaugh. He coached with McVay, like you said, with the Rams. Those are 3 of the best coaches in the entire sport. I love people that have learned from the greats and apply it in their own elements. And I think with all of those teaching moments that Jedd Fisch has had, his time is ready to come. And, there's rumors about how much he wants to come back to Southern California. I know a lot of the University of Arizona fans actually have, reached out and said, hey, man, like Jedd Fisch has always been interested in UCLA. It's interesting to see how this may happen. I know he's at Washington right now, but that was the kind of unknown secret, back with, people in Tucson was like Jedd Fisch wants to be in LA. So it's a big deal. Can we land him? I think that's still yet to be determined, but the fact that we're going after him and the 3 pillars they laid out, the connections to Los Angeles, Fisch has a great tie to Casey Wasserman, and just kind of his ability to be back at UCLA as a whole. I don't know. I think it's a home run, man. But let me pivot back to you on this question. Out of the other 3 or 4 names they listed, Orgeron, Dave Aranda from Baylor, Brent Brennan, who's currently at Arizona, which is kind of a weird sliding doors moment given the Jedd Fisch history there, and Tosh Lupoy, the defensive coordinator at Oregon. Which one of those 4 would you like the most if Fisch isn't the guy?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, Thriller. And, couldn't agree with you more on Fisch. Just the match made in heaven. And I think the fact that his connection with Wasserman is so strong,
huge.
You get that feeling that Casey is sort of pushing this. And, before I share who I really like outside of that, potentially, the fact that Fisch is making $7.75 million this year and has a $10 to $12 million buyout, and the fact that this committee is still sort of thinking about him, that tells you you're thinking big, that you realize that the resources that it takes to really be competitive, you have to sort of elevate it. And I think we've talked about it, Thriller, a lot. You're probably, as a football enterprise, you probably need about $35 million a year to be considered sort of a top 15, top 20 program. You need about 20 plus million for players, and you need about 10 plus million for coaches. And then, you're assuming the athletic department is going to help you with travel and the logistics and all of that. But then when you add some of these other elements, the nutritional elements, the training and development elements, this is a $35 million operation to just kind of get you into the top 20. And so I think what I'm most excited about is this committee, because it's small, number one, and number two, it's just the best of the best. When you talk about Casey is a tycoon when it comes to business. Bob Myers is a tycoon when it comes to organizational development in sports. When you talk about Adam Peters is a tycoon when it comes to football knowledge. And then Eric Kendricks is a tycoon when it comes to playing at the highest level. So you got four people, but all of whom are excellent, truly world-class in what they do. And I've always seen this, whether it's in business, whether it's in sports, whether it's in culture, whether it's in politics, what have you. If you bring together a small team of superstars, magic happens, because there's just such a sheer amount of talent and competence and intellect. And then you don't have to worry about the bureaucracy and the red tape, and everyone's got to have a voice and process and all of those things. And so the fact that this committee is small and so excellent, we're starting to sort of realize it. Now, look, it's one article. And so it's one data point, but Nakos is a very reputable source.
He's like the Ian Rappaport, Adam Schefter of college football.
Totally.
When he says something like this holds weight. That's the point of that article,
No, and so Thriller, to get back to your question, of those other names, I was the one, ironically enough, on the last show who was talking about Orgeron, right? And saying that was sort of a model. SC sort of missed it. So it was kind of funny to hear Nakos talk about Orgeron. I agree with you. I think the Ed Orgeron cachet, I think he would be still a phenomenal recruiter. I think you would need to have really strong coordinators around him.
Yeah,
but
agree.
I think the game has changed some in terms of even his skill set. I think Orgeron would just be your ideal recruiting coordinator, or the guy who's sort of your GM of recruiting. Lapoy is the one, Thriller, who's fascinating to me, because I think he is a rising coordinator. He's an incredible recruiter himself, with deep West Coast ties, high energy. And if you sort of go back on the show, when DeShaun was first let go, I had said, look, Fish and Smith were two guys that we would target, but the buyout is a cloud. And then I had said, look, White and Lynn are going to be two names that you're going to hear about right away. But don't be surprised if with that list, it's going to be a series of offensive and defensive coordinators from some of the top teams. Your Oregons, your Texases, your Georgias, and whatnot. And Tosh fits that bill to the T. My one question, Thriller, is he's been in some really high-intensity environments. He's super energetic, great recruiter. I think schematically on defense, he's phenomenal. But there's been a couple of dust-ups, with players, with the program. I just don't know how much that will align with Bruin values, with the UCLA culture. And I just wonder a little bit whether the personality is right. But in terms of Tosh, I just love everything on the field. I'm just slightly concerned about what's going on off the field. Not that it's been big incidences or big items or anything like that, but there's been remnants of enough things over the course of his career where you wonder, is UCLA culturally kind of the right fit for his personality? So for that reason, to me, it's just such a gap between Fish and everybody else on that list.
Yeah, I think Lupoy really represents like a diehard SEC fan base. That would be kind of his area to go to. But you know what I just thought of, which would be really interesting? What if two coaches on that initial list team up? Because if you remember, Dave Aranda was the defensive coordinator for Orgeron at LSU when they won the national championship. What if Aranda takes the head coaching job and you bring back Eddie O to coach the defensive line, or, back on the defensive coordinator side of things? How cool would that be? Just from a football standpoint, and the history kind of involved in that.
No, it would be incredible, because, there's also
sort of a couch right now saying, how do I get back into coaching?
Totally.
I could see him taking like a flyer for a year or two to maybe come out and, he's lived in LA before. He was an SC guy for so long. It would be weird to see him on a UCLA sideline.
Especially considering how much he loved
Sissy
USC.
Blue, we all remember that.
We remember it. It. So it'd be really fun to think about. But, Thriller, that's sort of the world of sports that we live in, of this day and age, these last 8 to 10 years. I mean, it sort of follows the script in so many ways. Again, I don't think Orgeron necessarily is the perfect guy or the ideal guy. I think it's a fun story to think about. But, oh, my God, for the rivalry, it would be so significant. And, again, that interplay with Aranda, like if you have Coach O, as your head coach, or you have Aranda as your head coach, you have Coach O, defensive line, head of recruiting, and then maybe you keep Jerry on the offense. And now you got a really nice nucleus of coaches. But like you and I talked about, I think there's still some questions about Aranda. I think there's questions about Orgeron. To me, this feels like Fish is clearly kind of separated in terms of just desirability for me. And has always been the case. So let's see how this sort of plays out. I'm really excited to have Nakos on the show in a couple of weeks here. So fans, stay tuned for that. But additional thoughts, Thriller?
Yeah, and I think the cool thing with Jedd Fisch coming down is if we could keep Jerry on staff, Jerry would be able to develop as an offensive coordinator and maybe learn some of those head coaching intangibles. Because as much as I love Jedd Fisch, it's clear he wants to elevate to the highest status of college football. So even if he comes to UCLA, let's say he does that Arizona turnaround where we're winning 10, 11 games, there's going to be some big places calling, and it's proven over time. If he's even listening to this offer right now, he's got an ear open at all times saying, hey, man, I'm open to coming to these different places. You guys just got to show me the money and the opportunity to do so. But if you can have a plan in place where you're developing Jerry at the same time, with a Jedd Fisch, learning under another offensive mind similar to a Chip Kelly, I mean, that's the best case scenario for him to kind of master his skill set. So by the time Fisch does leave, we've groomed our guy, Jerry, to lead the cause and those golden locks coming down from his hair, man.
The golden locks. No, it's so well said, Thriller. It's so well said. And I think here's also where the committee and the approach has to be very measured. Because if you come out, and again, it's one article, but Nakos, we hold a lot of weight into what Nakos has to say. If you come out and are super aggressive with Jedd Fisch, I still believe that Florida job is going to open up. Napier beat Texas, but I think and we've heard reports that it's going to take a miracle finish for Napier to be able to keep his job. Like Florida's probably going to. I'm sorry.
Can they fundraise enough? Because his buyout is like
his buyout is massive. But
even Urban Meyer came out and said, "I don't know if he can do it."
I don't know. It's true, but it's still sort of an SEC job. Florida's got a big athletic department.
Of Florida, I get it. If that job is realistically open, and they do want Napier out of town, that's no secret. If that job's open, I think he would choose that job.
Fisch is an alum, so that's why. And you don't want to be in a situation where you put sort of all of your enthusiasm behind Fisch. If you get jilted there, now where do you go? Even from a negotiating standpoint, right? Because if everyone knows your first choice walked out the door and now you're left kind of scrambling, well, guess what? That's how prices get elevated. That's how things become inflationary. And that's how you start paying big money for guys with not big results. And then, oh, by the way, you realize after a couple of years, they're not really suitable for this job, and then you got to buy them out. And then voila, we're back to sort of where we were the last 5 or 6 years. So I think it's going to be really interesting. I would imagine, Thriller, and this is just me, I think there's going to be sort of a secondary candidate that's also going to emerge as a front runner. More also just to sort of keep it balanced from a UCLA perspective, from a negotiation standpoint. So I'm expecting in the next 7, 8, 10 days that we see and hear something where some other front runner also emerges or some name really emerges to sort of balance the Fisch narrative. So you're still in a position of negotiating strength moving forward. So just really exciting, though, that we're thinking about these folks, Thriller. And you said it best. I mean, my God, what a roller coaster ride this has been for us the last 10, 12, 14 days to be where we were kind of the post New Mexico to now. It's incredible. And what a ride it's absolutely been. And so, Thriller, that takes us to now the game on Saturday, and obviously there's still a game to play. And it hasn't felt that, like, this is probably the first week that it's sort of quote unquote like a normal game after a while, because you had this start, we were behind the 8-ball, 0-1, 0-2, 0-3, 0-4. Every week felt like the sky was falling. And then last week, you go from, a bottom feeder in college football to the darling of college football. I mean, everybody was talking about UCLA this week. Yeah. It was unbelievable. Urban Meyer, John Gruden. I mean, everybody was talking about UCLA this week. So we finally kind of get to maybe a place of normalcy here with Michigan State. And Thriller, really curious to get your thoughts on this game. Michigan State kind of comes in here winless in the Big Ten. They got off to a really nice start, a couple of, non-Power 4 wins, and then they had that big overtime win at home against Boston College. Now they come back, kind of some back-to-back losses here between USC, between Nebraska. Aiden Childs, their quarterback, Mekhi Frazier, running back, and they got two really, really good receivers in Omari Kelly and Nick Marsh. Aiden Childs, to me, is a little raw, Thriller. There's the numbers on the periphery look good, but really struggled last week against Nebraska. 9 for 23, 85 yards, 2 interceptions. And then against SC, he was 12 for 21 with 212 yards, 3 touchdowns. But there were 2 coverage busts in that game. There was a coverage bust right at the beginning of that game and right at the end of that game. So he had 2 completions on 2 coverage busts that were about 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. So you take that away, and for the vast majority of that game, he was kind of at 90 yards passing. So these sort of last 2 losses, he hasn't even really crossed 100 yards passing. But Omari Kelly is a speed demon and a shifty guy, really, really talented. And Nick Marsh, Thriller, probably outside of the Ohio State receiving core and the Indiana receiving core and Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane across town, you're probably talking about the next best receiver in the Big Ten in terms of that size and that catch radius. So he's got weapons. Frazier's kind of your big classic 4 yards in a cloud of dust, physical Big Ten running back. So on paper, they got the skill. Offensive line has been very shaky at times, and the defense has been extremely leaky. But overall, Thriller, your thoughts about Michigan State and UCLA's chances?
Yeah, momentum is a crazy thing. So I think if UCLA can keep practicing what they were preaching this past week, good things are going to happen. And, Aiden Childs, very, very talented quarterback. I think this could be one of the more fun and entertaining games for UCLA fans because Childs and Nico are both scrambling dual threat quarterbacks that can turn, a 5-yard sack that has potential to be into a 30, 35-yard rush. So these two guys going at it's like Lamar Jackson against Michael Vick. It's going to be fun to watch. Woo! And Childs, to me, is a first-round draft pick for me in terms of if this guy hits the portal, he's going to do a Jaden Daniels or he's going to do a Cam Ward and go to one of those programs where it's oh, yeah, this guy's really good. He was just at Michigan State where he didn't have the talent around him. But for me, I think he's that Miami rebuild program when Cam Ward comes in there and Carson Beck comes in there, they kind of have these 1-year rentals. He's my number 1 draft pick if I'm Miami being Beck's going to the league. We got to find a new quarterback. Let's pay this kid from Michigan State. They're really talented, but the key to this game for me is third down conversions. Michigan State ranks in the bottom 25 in college football when it comes to allowing 44% of first down opportunities in those third down scenarios. So if we can build upon last week, remember, we were miserable for the first 4 weeks of the season, but 10 of 16 on third downs last week with Jerry Neuheisel calling the plays. I think this is a real opportunity for UCLA to kind of come out there, extend some of these. Maybe Nico runs for a couple more. Maybe we can get our guy Rico Flores involved. Quasi had his best game of the season last week. The rush defense is pretty good. They're 33rd in the entire country. So I think it's going to be hard to run the football. But, I would have said Penn State's a more talented run defense, and we ran for about 290 yards on the ground. So that's the key, is those third downs and how we run the football. Nico had a lot of off script kind of runs last week. I want to see freaking Anthony Woods get 20, 25 carries. I want to see the Jet Thomas kind of do some stuff as well. And Berger was getting involved. So if our run game's nice, Nico comes out there and kind of duels in a fun fashion with Aiden Childs. I think there's a chance here, man. Like you said, they haven't had a Big Ten win yet. Their only big win, I think, is against Boston College, which was in double overtime. They barely won. There's a real opportunity here, but let me pivot back to you. I think we missed a big key on this. Jonathan Smith is the head coach of Michigan State. That is a huge factor coming into this game. Specifically, he's on the short list of a lot of UCLA fans. Talk to me, like, if Tim Skipper beats Jonathan Smith, is he no longer a candidate for you at UCLA, or how would you evaluate that?
I was trying to, Thriller. It's almost like a game of Marco Polo. You're trying to sort of avoid the Jonathan Smith because we've talked about it so much. But we have to talk about it, of course. Thriller, it's fascinating, right? Because to me, if you come in on the road and you're Tim Skipper and you beat Jonathan Smith in his backyard in a year where he's got to have it, and you're able to do that, I think it's a huge step up for Tim Skipper, and I think things cool with Jonathan Smith, particularly given the start that Michigan State has had. And Thriller, I completely agree with you. Childs has all of the physical tools, and it just hasn't come together yet. And he's got a really good running back, and he's got two really good receivers. So it's not like he doesn't have weapons. Now, the offensive line has been shaky, no question about it. But you would expect a kid who's as talented as Childs, and he's raw, but there's a lot of talent there, I think, to have played better in these bigger games. I mean, Thriller, we're talking about sub 100-yard passing right now. We're talking about multiple interceptions.
Bad game last week, but
bad game. So and bad couple games. I mean, SC was shaky against USC for the vast majority of that game. And so you wonder, in terms of coaching, what is really going on here? Because for as good as Jonathan Smith has been, I don't know if Jonathan Smith has that quarterback that he's developed on his resume. Even that great year with Oregon State, where you got the double-digit wins, that really elevated his stock. DJU was the quarterback. They had a great running game, and they had a great offensive line. And DJU was basically throwing the ball 15 times a game on bootleg play actions. And so, if Skipper comes in here with Nico and this motley crew that we love, this endearing crew that we love so much, and comes in and gets a win, Thriller, I think it's going to be really huge for Skipper. And I think the Jonathan Smith conversation is going to cool significantly. And to me, the one thing I'll add is, in terms of matchup, you said it so well. Michigan State's really good in terms of run defense, but run defense on the interior, in between the tackles, they have struggled on the edge. And so Nico's ability to be able to run it to the outside, I think, is going to be there. Number two, I think we're going to see some more wheel routes with Woods. Like, I have my eye on some wheel routes. You remember that great throw he had against Utah, the lone highlight we had in that season opener. I am expecting Woods to sort of get out on a couple wheel routes and be able to open some things up. And Michigan State, kind of a bit of a leaky secondary. This could be the Rico return game. This could be the Rico Flores return game here. Perhaps we could have some shades of Hawaii. So the three elements I'm kind of looking for when UCLA's got the ball: Nico continuing to go on the outside. I think Woods is going to make a big impact on these wheel routes. And I think this could be a game where Flores is north of 80 yards receiving, maybe even a 100-yard receiving game for Rico. What do you think about that, Thriller?
I think it's definitely plausible. Rico looked really good, fast, active on the football field. We talked about him recovering the onside kick. Like, he was the fastest guy off the line for that play and making plays in the open field. The thing that I think helps out all different receivers is Quasi felt so much pressure as kind of the only true threat. Yeah. Now that he got Rico there, his game opened up. He had his best individual performance last week against very good cornerbacks in Penn State. So, man, I think the sky's the limit for these duos. And now that Nico, just doesn't have that one target he's got to focus on, and he can kind of go to a round and pepper it as we've talked about in the past, I think there's a lot of optimism that Rico can have a huge game. And, dude, he was like the best receiver we had last year before he got hurt. So it's just a welcome player to come in. I mean, we talked about it at length. This guy was offered by Ohio State out of high school. Ohio State just doesn't offer any other wide receiver. If you look at their track record in recent years of who they've put in the league, that's Brian Hartline going, I want you on my football team. And he was at Notre Dame. He was very productive as Notre Dame as a freshman. This isn't just some average cat. This is like a legit stud out there. He worked harder than anybody on the practice field, as we can attest to from watching him warm up and go through his routes. He's a baller. Wayne described him as a professional. I completely agree. I think his ceiling is going to the NFL. So, like, having a guy like that, a traditional NFL body, just placed in this receiving room 5 games in the year, I think it's huge. And 80 yards plus, I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking for my guy Hudson, too. I want Hudson Habermill to make some plays, man. We haven't yet called that out, but it's the perfect time to open up the tight end room. Do it at 9 a.m. in East Lansing. We can make some plays. So those are my 2 guys I got going off as well.
I love it, Thriller. And let's get Hudson going here in the red zone. I could totally see it here on the road. I think the one thing that makes me a little bit nervous, Thriller, about this game, we got to talk defense, and I think the defense was much improved against Penn State. But this is probably the best receiving core that this defense has faced by, I think, a significant amount, Penn State included. And so I think between Marsh and Kelly, how does this secondary hold up in coverage? And Childs is a guy who likes to take his shots. He's going to miss some. He's going to make some. With Childs, to your point, it's feast or famine sometimes. Sometimes it's a 50-yard reception and sometimes it's a 15-yard sack. And I think UCLA is going to win some, and I think Michigan State is going to win some. But I think the key is going to be when Michigan State wins some, you don't want those some to be 70-yard touchdowns. You want to be able to kind of limit the big play. So I think as long as the secondary can stay in front of these guys, I think they're going to get their yards. It's just sort of the nature of the beast. But I think if you can kind of limit the big play from a top-end perspective, get tight and tighter in the red zone, and be opportunistic when you can, I think there's a great opportunity here, Thriller. UCLA is an 8.5-point underdog on the road. I'm telling you, I'm feeling really good here. There's a new energy. There's a new revival. I got UCLA upsetting the Spartans of Michigan State, sending Jonathan Smith home and out the door in terms of this coaching search. I got the Bruins 34-27 on the road. Get that second Big Ten win.
Love it, man. Yeah, I think that's a really good score predicament if Jerry's able to kind of build what he did last week into this, because it's a road game. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be 6 a.m. for a lot of these guys going out there. But that's part of the business. These guys are pro athletes now. You know what I mean? This is NIL era going out to East Lansing. So, yeah, I think 35-31. I think it's going to be a last-second drive here. Nico's going to keep that magic going, and we're going to be the talk of college football again this week, going, man, UCLA's won 2 in a row with this Tim Skipper and Jerry guy. Let's see what they could do for the rest of the year. I agree. Dub coming for the Bruins out in East Lansing in a big way.
Dub coming, little Thriller calling a dub. You're getting a dub from the biggest Dubs fan there is. So you know what you're getting, folks, here. But Thriller, it's going to be so exciting. We're going to be glued to the TV. Let's see what happens. And as always, LAFB fans, we got all the coverage post-game. We're going to break it all down for our Bruins, hopefully to go to 2-4 and become the talk of college football yet again this week. Get that winning streak going, perhaps go to 2-1 in the Big Ten, and then all these possibilities of optimism continue. So before we sign off, obviously we got to pay the bills around here. You see the Sleeper app on the bottom. Use that promo code UCLA LAFB. Get $100 off your match bonus. That's $100 to bet, and $100 are free. So you get $200 for $100 there, and you can do all kinds of great things. This year, millions of users enjoyed playing fantasy sports on Sleeper, but the app offers so much more. You got live stats, you have a news feed, and then, oh, by the way, you also have that real-time chat where you can engage with other users about individual plays and performances during the NFL and NBA seasons. Thriller and I were just talking about his main man from Arizona State, Cam Scatterbo, blowing up on Thursday Night Football here. So the Sleeper app gives you all those predictive analytics to figure out who the next Scatterbo is going to be next week in fantasy. Download the #1 sports app today and experience it for yourself. And tell them the guys at LAFB sent you. Well, Thriller, another great one in the books. And Bruin fans, let's support our team out there. East Lansing is a tough place to play, but we're riding high with a ton of momentum, a ton of team unity, a new team culture, and a can-do attitude. where we feel like we can do anything. So this is a great week, as we always say, to be loud, to be proud, to be passionate, Bruins. And as always, Forza forever.